What happens to a superpower when it runs out of workers and customers at the same time? For 40 years, China's rise was built on a single powerful promise: work hard, sacrifice your youth, and tomorrow your life will be better. That promise created one of the greatest economic miracles in modern history. But today, the neon lights are flickering. Young people are lying flat. Families are refusing to spend. Massive apartment complexes stand like hollow skeletons across the landscape. China is facing one of the hardest challenges any rising power can face: getting old before it becomes rich enough to make aging easy. Behind the military parades, the skyscrapers, and the high-tech surveillance, the Chinese dream is entering its most dangerous phase. In the next 8 minutes, we are going to look beneath the official story and follow the structural wall China is hitting. Unfinished homes, shrinking workers, broken confidence, and a generation that no longer believes sacrifice guarantees a future. What happens next will decide not just China's future, but the price of everything in your pocket, and the stability of the global economy itself. Stay until the end. For decades, the world watched China as if it were an unstoppable force of nature. It felt like every year a new megacity appeared out of nowhere. High-speed trains, sprawling factories, ports moving more goods than entire continents, and skylines that looked like they belonged in the next century. Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou. These cities became symbols of the Chinese miracle. But underneath that spectacular speed, the foundation was built on a dangerous assumption that growth would never stop. China's rise was not only fueled by exports, it was also driven by a relentless need to build. Apartments, roads, bridges, industrial parks, new districts, entire cities. Sometimes they were needed. Sometimes they were built because the system needed growth, land sales, jobs, and the appearance of momentum. Real estate and related sectors became the beating heart of the economy, once accounting for roughly 25 to 30% of China's economic activity. It was not just about providing homes, it was about moving money, creating collateral, funding local governments, and giving ordinary families a place to store their life savings. For the average Chinese family, property was never just property. It was security, it was retirement, it was status. It was the one investment people believed the state would never allow to fail. In a country where the stock market felt volatile and bank interest was low, families poured years, sometimes generations, of savings into apartments. Often they bought these homes before they were even built. A model apartment, a sales office, a promise, and a mortgage that began long before the keys arrived. They believed prices would rise forever. They believed the developers would finish. They believed the system would protect them. But now, that confidence has shattered. China has entered the era of the rotten tail buildings. Across the country, some estimates suggest that around 20 million pre-sold homes may still be unfinished. Concrete towers with no windows, no plumbing, no lights, no families. Construction cranes frozen above half-built cities. Buyers trapped between a mortgage they still owe and a home they may never receive. Imagine giving your life savings to a developer, then watching that developer collapse, and still being forced to pay every month for a ghost home. That is the human cost of the property crisis. When a family's wealth is tied to property they no longer trust, the wealth effect disappears. People stop spending. They stop going to restaurants. They delay buying cars. They postpone marriage. They stop planning for the future. They start surviving. And that psychological shift may be more dangerous than the debt itself, because economies are built on confidence. And when confidence breaks, stimulus checks and slogans are not enough to bring it back. This economic pain has created a silent revolution among China's youth. They call it Tang Ping, lying flat. After years of brutal competition in the education system, the Gaokao pressure cooker, young graduates are entering a job market that no longer rewards the sacrifice they were promised. For years, the 996 work culture, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week, was treated as the price of success. It built tech giants. It built fortunes. It built the image of unstoppable ambition. But for many young people today, it no longer feels like a ladder. It feels like a trap. Work endlessly, compete constantly, rent a tiny apartment, delay marriage, avoid children, and still never get close to owning a home. Some are doing the minimum required to survive. Some are refusing to marry. Some are refusing to buy homes. Some are refusing to fuel the same system that exhausted them. There is an even darker phrase now, let it rot. It captures a feeling of resignation, not rebellion in the streets, not revolution, something quieter, a generation that looks at the deal offered to them and says, no, this is a nightmare for a system built on mobilization. A superpower needs an energetic, consuming middle class to keep growing. Instead, China has a generation that is quietly checking out. This is not laziness. It is rational exhaustion, and it is happening at the worst possible moment, because China is also hitting a demographic cliff. After decades of the one-child policy, China is aging faster than almost any major economy in modern history. Its working-age population has already peaked. The world's factory is no longer guaranteed an endless supply of young, cheap workers. That changes everything. Labor costs rise. Factories rethink supply chains. Global companies diversify. Production that once concentrated in the Pearl River Delta begins moving, slowly and quietly, toward Vietnam, India, Mexico, and other alternatives. The very thing that made China the workshop of the world is no longer as powerful as it used to be. The government knows this. That is why Beijing is trying to pivot toward what it calls high-quality growth, electric vehicles, green energy, advanced chips, artificial intelligence, industrial upgrading. And in some areas, China is genuinely impressive. Its EV industry is massive. Its solar manufacturing dominates global supply. Its industrial capacity is enormous. But there is a problem. You cannot replace a massive real estate sector that supported millions of jobs with car batteries and solar panels overnight. The math does not work that quickly. You can build all the EV factories you want, but if households at home are afraid to spend and countries abroad are putting up trade barriers, you are left with overcapacity. Too many factories, too many products, not enough demand. And that pressure does not stay inside China, it spills outward. Before we get to the global impact, we have to look at the governments that built the miracle from the ground up. For years, local governments funded themselves by selling land to developers. It was a perfect circle. The government sold land, developers built apartments, families bought them with debt. The government used the money to build roads, bridges, subway lines, industrial zones, and entire new districts. But when developers slowed down, the land sales slowed with them, and the financing model began to break. Today, local governments and their financing vehicles face debt pressure estimated in the trillions of dollars. Some estimates exceed 9 trillion. This is not just an accounting problem, it affects real life. In some places, public services are being squeezed. Transport budgets are under pressure. Local authorities are being forced to cut costs. The infrastructure that once symbolized unlimited growth now has to be maintained by governments with weaker revenue and heavier debt. This is how miracles become burdens. A bridge that once proved progress now requires maintenance. A subway line that once proved ambition now requires subsidies. A new district that once looked like the future now needs people who may never arrive. And this is why China's crisis matters to you, even if you never set foot in China. For 20 years, the world economy relied on a China that kept buying. German cars, American technology, Australian iron ore, African minerals, luxury goods, industrial machinery. But a China focused on internal survival is a China that buys less from the world. If Chinese households stay cautious, global growth slows. If Chinese factories keep producing more than the domestic market can absorb, China exports the surplus. Cheap electric vehicles, cheap solar panels, cheap manufactured goods. That sounds good for consumers at first, but it also creates pressure on factories in Europe, North America, and other parts of Asia. It leads to tariffs, trade investigations, political tension, and a new era of economic conflict. This is what people mean when they talk about China exporting deflationary pressure. Not just products, pressure. Pressure on prices, pressure on wages, pressure on competitors, pressure on the global trading system. The tragedy of the Chinese miracle is that it was built on the assumption that tomorrow would always be bigger than today. More workers, more apartments, more exports, more highways, more debt, more growth. But the mathematics of aging and the reality of a housing bubble have finally caught up. The skyscrapers still stand, the ports still operate, the factories are still running, and hundreds of millions of surveillance cameras still watch the streets. But cameras cannot create economic growth. They cannot force a generation to have children. They cannot make families trust unfinished apartments again. They cannot manufacture hope once it has been lost. As we look at the hollowed-out developers, the cautious consumers, and the quiet frustration of the youth, the question is no longer simply whether China will surpass the United States. The question is how the world handles a wounded giant that is no longer growing the way everyone expected. The transition from the Chinese miracle to Chinese stagnation may become one of the defining economic events of our decade. The neon lights of Shanghai are still bright, but they are shining on a system that has reached its hardest test. The factory is still running, but the soul of the machine has changed. The dream is over. Now the reality begins.